So at this point, I want to take a moment to introduce some trauma calming skills. And these are based on really ancient understandings and practices. There's an idea that we have an energy field, electrical field around our bodies. And if you take pictures with something like a Kirlian camera, you can actually see that electricity around the body. My people have an understanding, the Irish, that we actually carry our bodies inside of our spirits. It's called carrying the clay being our bodies. So it's an understanding that crosses many cultures. In one culture, they might call it an aura. And so when we're looking at an aura and we're looking at that energy field, I'm going to go ahead and use that language. It's like looking at a plug in the wall, an electrical plug. And that electrical plug is where the electricity comes in. And that is universal spiritual energy, universal life force energy. And so it comes from the universe, or comes from God, comes from something bigger than us that is eternal, that's understood to be having been there forever. And that energy comes in and it goes through these different portals in our body, these open doors in and out. And some people call those chakras. And so those will be circles of energy that are like whirlpools where the electricity comes in and goes out. And we also carry them in our hands in different places in our body. And that helps us connect with the universe and ground to the earth. That's one understanding, one view of how that can work. When we have trauma, the trauma is stuck in our body, and there are ways to reach that because it's also embedded in parts of our brain. We can actually put our hands in certain places and we can warm up parts of our body, and we can attract that electricity to move to that part of the body. When we put our hands in certain places, like in our head, for example, it warms those places up and it brings the blood physically back to those areas, okay? So when we dissociate and we're having fight, flight, freeze, or submit responses, it feels like we've kind of left brain, right brain have split apart inside our head, and we're kind of floating out of our body on the ceiling, okay? That's kind of the dissociation of freeze, for example. When we put our hands on our brain, we can lean back, close our eyes, and we can go into a safe place. Or if we're having a trauma response, we might not want to close our eyes. We want to actually be very present in this moment, not in a memory, because this moment might be safe and the flashback memory that we're stuck in might not be. And so we can close our eyes if we want to meditate, but we open our eyes if we're having a trauma response, and put our head on the nape of our neck and on the forehead. And that brings the blood back to that area instead of to the heart where it goes when we're having a trauma response. Because we want that heart to beat and to have that blood rush to our heart and keep us safe in the core of our body. And so when we lean our head back, we can actually speak using one of our senses, and look and listen and use as many senses as we can. So I might say, the ceiling is white. Today is Monday, my name is Kelly, and I am safe. And that can bring me right back to today. And another place that we can put our hands is on our chest and on our tummy. And when we start having a trauma response, sometimes what happens is we start to breathe really, really shallow and fast, like a little bunny rabbit who's afraid. And we actually want to tell our body, no, I'm safe, so I want to realize that this is where I'm breathing from, but on my stomach, my belly is where I want to breathe from. So if we're breathing from our belly, our bottom hand will rise and fall, because we're taking a deep breath and we're letting it out from the belly. And so I've actually trained myself, and this is something when you're doing a lot of practice, you're sitting in a meeting and you hear something really triggering. I look down, and for 1 minute, I go, whoa, I must be having a trauma response, because look where my hands landed. because my hands know quicker than my brain. My thinking might be shut down, but my body knows. And so I'll do that and I'll look and go, okay, start breathing from your belly, Kelly. And that's where I'll be breathing from. If you're doing both at the same time, you're going to calm your body responses down a lot quicker. Women tend to live in the womb. So when we've lost custody of our children, for example, that feels like that's where we might bleed out energetically through that kind of trauma. We live in our hearts. We actually see out of our brain. We actually feel like this is a big place of where we live. This is where the driver of our life lives, is right behind the eyeballs. Another way that we can ground is, and you can't see my feet, but try this out. Cross your ankles naturally at the ankles. Cross your legs at the ankles. And then look at your hands and cross your wrists exactly the opposite. And so the first time you do it, you may end up doing it exactly the same. So take a look. You might have to change your hands. And then when you have them the opposite of your ankles, like my ankles are right over left, and I want left over right. And so then you lace your fingers, and then you pull your fingers that are laced up to the chin. So you're kind of sitting like a pretzel, right? And then you drop your jaw so it's not touching your teeth, and you ground your tongue. This is supposedly a yoga move, but I'm not familiar with yoga enough to be able to tell you what it is. And you ground your tongue on the roof of your mouth without your teeth touching. And if you'll remember, the medical symbol of the snakes around the staff and the DNA, those symbols are a staff with the wrapping, just like we're sitting here. So what's happened is we're taking that energy that is split and feels like left brain, right brain splitting outside of our body, and we're bringing that all back, and we're wrapping that around, and we're bringing that energy back to our body where it belongs and knitting it back together. And so this is a way that if I'm meditating and I'm not in a flashback, I can close my eyes, I can visualize being a tree, letting that light come in and into my heart, going through my heart, out my arms, down my trunk, down my legs, grounding into the earth, coming back up and into my heart. And when I do those, I come back into my body, and my blood comes back to my brain, comes back to my limbs. I don't feel like I got jello limbs anymore. And I'm able to make decisions rather than reacting out of fight, flight, freeze, or submit.